All right. Recording now.
And we're
You
going?
still want to do the intro then?
Yeah, I'll do the intro. And then we'll roll. Are we going?
Yeah, I guess so.
What up, guys? This is DJ Talks episode 3. We're going to be talking about esports integrity, cheating, all that other fun logistical stuff that you don't really hear as much about. I'm Johnny. I don't remember which side you're on again.
Right.
To my right over there is Dan.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, Dan?
Yeah, yeah. So, I know that we have a small number of regular listeners, and I just wanted to say that I'm really thankful that there are some of you guys that are following us. And then, we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback over the first 2 episodes. Hopefully this episode's audio quality will be better. We're still working on the technical issues that we're having, particularly from my end more than Dan's, but we're getting the kinks out as we're learning how to get the formula correct. But really, Dan and I can't thank you guys enough for all the positive feedback and the support that we've gotten ever since we've officially launched. So couldn't really say that in episode 2 because that was recorded before we did episode 1, but I did want to take the time and say thanks.
Thank you, viewers. Thank you.
Yeah, or listeners, or
Or
both, or
listeners,
whatever.
or whatever you. We'll eventually be on. What was it? Stitcher, maybe,
Hmm.
maybe potentially Stitcher. We'll eventually maybe be on SoundCloud as well, so you guys can listen to us while you're driving, while you're sleeping, or the shower, wherever you like to hear our voices.
Yeah. We're hoping that eventually we'll be able to get on those platforms once we have a more regular, consistent schedule going, and when we have, like you said, like a formula to roll with in terms of like our topics,
Mhm.
um, how long we're going to do these things, etc., so forth. But anyway, on to the main topic. So we're going to talk a lot about esports integrity and cheating, gambling, match fixing, things like that. So if that's not something that interests you, it's all good. This is also kind of an experiment for us to talk about something very specific, where we kind of explain a brand new topic to the listener while we talk a little bit about the things that already exist in terms of our knowledge and how other companies have dealt with integrity before, what other companies are doing now, like third-party organizations, and then what our opinions are.
Mhm.
So again, this is something that we're doing a little differently. Um, yeah.
But
Go ahead.
yeah. So to start off, I guess, um, this it's basically the start is what's called the Esports Integrity Coalition, which is an organization that was founded around 2015 by a lawyer, a UK lawyer that used to actually be part of practicing law for players of bigger sports like cricket or soccer or football, if you want to call it. So he actually had experience in the sports industry, and now he's actually brought it over into the esports industry, where you can find now he's one of the co-founders of this organization called Esports Integrity Coalition. Now, pretty much what this is they're trying to become like an impartial third-party organization that is guarding the esports integrity, and basically wants to kind of be the organization that is responsible for holding certain things like hearings of when players had certain issues in regards to cheating or match fixing, and then trying to figure out what the best punishment, what the best or reasonable sanctions, and then having an appeal process behind that. So the whole kind of organization is just trying to maintain the integrity of esports and make sure that things that players do, like cheating, doesn't affect the future of esports. So I know I know that I hate it when you have something like a hacker or a cheater or somebody who's messing with the game, especially in something like CS:GO, where I play somewhat irregularly, but you have those aimbotters, those wallers. It is the most frustrating thing to play against. However, that's not even the biggest thing behind esports, and I'll explain a little bit more. But um, I'm gonna go over to Johnny. What are your thoughts on kind of the brief summary of this organization and what it's trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so just for the viewer's sake, we're going to be using that phrase esports integrity a lot. And the way we're defining that is if you look at esports, you think about the world of sports, football players, basketball players, um, big national, international sports leagues. Just think about that, but for the world of competitive video games where people are at their computers playing in huge tournaments for money. So think about that, but then, people cheating, maybe they're taking drugs, performance enhancing drugs, maybe they're using exploits in a game that are just unfair and not that you can't play against. Like Dan talked about, like
Mm-hmm.
aimbotting, which is like having a program on your computer that aims for you. Um, Map hacking, maybe having access to or vision on a map that you shouldn't have vision to, that gives you an unfair advantage,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So that's kind of what we talk about in terms of esports integrity, where the playing field is fair and no one side has a huge advantage for whatever reason it is. But so when you talk about this coalition, this organization,
Mm-hmm.
I think that conceptually it's a really good idea. You look at Riot Games. Riot Games in 2013 founded the League of Legends Championship Series, which is their own pro league, and they created it artificially. There's a lot of artificial hype for it that they just kind of came up with on their own because the company had access to these pro players and a really popular game, and then they streamed it. They just made it seem really exciting for anyone that liked the game, anyone that liked like these really good players that if they had played with them before, um, and just like creating the idea that this is the next big thing. So the problem with that though is that Riot, when they created that artificial esports scene, I mean, when they created the artificial hype for the esports scene that they call the League of Legends Championship Series, otherwise known as LCS, they are also the ones to punish players. They're the ones that have complete control of the league. They pay players, things like that.
Judge, jury, and executioner of
Everything.
everything that
Yeah.
happens when it comes to League of Legends.
Right. So then when you have like a third party organization like this that wants to step in and get involved, they're clearly there for a slice of the pie. They know that the esports industry is getting really big and they want to hop on that. I can't blame them. I mean, arguably what Dan and I are doing now is part of that. It's not like we're making money off of this podcast at all, but we're getting on that, we're getting involved because it's something that we enjoy and we know that there's an audience for it, right? When you're looking at the Esports Integrity Coalition, their goal is to step in and help these big companies with their expertise in law to to decide whether or not,
Mhm.
oh, this team really was cheating and we got to punish appropriately, or maybe there was just a coincidence and it wasn't completely intentional. I think ideally it's a good organization, but the two things that come to mind that I'm really worried about is whether or not anyone's going to take them seriously, because you need to have trust and respect for an organization like this in order to let them make a decision that big, or to take a recommendation from them as to what to do with the
Mhm.
team who you suspect of cheating, right?
Right.
Secondly, they also have to be involved with, I think they can't just be involved with a few games, because they're trying to set a standard. And if they want that standard to be recognized, then other teams have to be on board with them.
Right.
So I think that there has to be some kind of establishment of what that standard is, which they already have on their website in terms of what they call their principles. But then it goes hand in hand with the first point that I brought up, that they have to have trust. People need to look at them and respect them and say, this was a good decision. They're trying to be impartial. There's no such thing as a unbiased opinion, but they're as impartial as possible to where the community agrees that it was probably the best decision. Because Dan, like Dan said, and we'll talk about more later, they do want to take a little bit of the community's ideas and
Mhm.
their viewpoints and implement them into their principles, right?
Right.
So I mean, like, just to wrap it up, I do, or like just to wrap up my point, I do think that it's a good idea, but it's gonna be really hard to get off the ground.
So along those lines, I guess I just want to explain more about it. In general, esports is a very young scene right now. It is budding. It is only what I mean. It's been around for a while. Like I guess you can consider it a while in esports terms, but if you think of like sporting terms like basketball or baseball, they've been around for tens of I think almost 100 or 100 years at least. I think I'm not too familiar with that, but um, compared to that, esports is really young. It's like a toddler versus someone who's 100 years old. So it'll take time um, in order for things to grow. But uh, this is a very, very good start. Esports, the Integrity Coalition, is a member association, is what they call it. It is a not for profit members association where they take into consideration the community. So, what they did was they pretty much put out a survey. Now, it wasn't a survey to kind of every game wide, but they had a huge community who actually responded to it. Um, they basically the survey was to find out kind of what the punishments are for these big issues or big issues that they decided upon. So they took into consideration the communities kind of voting on what should happen if something like the big names are cheating, if some team were to cheat or a player were to cheat, if a player or team were to be fixing a match or kind of throwing or intentionally losing a match in order to obtain monetary value, or um, doping. So things like Adderall or things that may be a performance enhancing drug when it comes to esports specifically, or something like bribing or competition. Now they basically put out a survey to figure out what the best punishments are for these. So they're a member focused, community focused organization, I guess you can consider. Um, and then they're not for profit. So in general, the company itself is not going to be making money. Obviously, the people behind it will be paid whatever they need to be paid, but um, at least in the beginning, at the very start of it, there is no corruption yet. When it comes to the Esports Integrity
Ugh.
Coalition now, even in sporting now, in basketball, baseball, football, all of these, there's probably situations, even if there is a third party organization that handles all of these, there are probably people who are being paid off, or even if you think about the government, people, I mean, people always say someone's getting paid off to say something, or lawmakers are being paid a certain amount of money in order to kind of bring up a law. There's no matter what, when it comes to humans, there's always going to be some type of corruption. But at the very least, at the very start of this, very good start to kind of uphold the integrity or uphold the honest play behind esports in general. Okay.
But if you're saying if there's gonna eventually be some kind of corruption or whatever, then what's the point of starting an organization like this at all?
You see, the problem is when it comes to the scene now. So, like I said, if you like you said earlier, when it comes to League of Legends, Riot handles literally everything. So when it comes to there's no consistency behind what Riot does. Right? Rules are being kind of made out of thin air. Rules 2 years ago versus rules now. Um, um, Certain situations where a team were like CLG were fined for using what was it? different accounts because they went to Counter Logic Gaming, one of the League of Legends teams. They used different accounts that weren't theirs in Korea when they were practicing over in Korea for a specific tournament. Okay. Now, they were fined a certain amount, and when it comes to other rulings, they're completely different when it comes to Riot. So there's never a consistent rule or law or something that makes sure that all players are treated completely equally.
Yeah, but in that situation where they were using other Korean accounts,
Right.
it's not like they were cheating or anything. They were just using other accounts
Okay.
because they wanted to practice, right? I think that's getting a little like
Okay, a little
off of
outside.
the
Okay,
yeah.
but then certain things like it's still the principle behind it where Riot can create rules at any time to fit the needs of Riot.
Theoretically, that is the case because they have so much
Theoretically,
power
right?
in the LCS. Yeah.
There's also no clarity behind what is going on when it comes to any type of rule. So if something were to happen, we don't know any. The biggest thing was when I don't even know if this really matches specifically with this organization, but when an organization, the Monte Cristo, one of the big names used to be in League of Legends, they owned a team, and at one point there were talks about kind of basically they were Riot says they were trading players back and forth at some point with another team to best benefit each team, and it was against the rules at some point, and he was fined or he was banned for a certain period of time. Now, we never knew any of the evidence behind it. We were given it by Monte Cristo, the actual owner of one of the
I mean, we got his side of it.
Right. But we never got anything behind Riot's side, right? We don't know if it would have been true. We don't know if, there were a lot of history back because there's always this little rumor that said that Riot didn't really like Monte Cristo, or Riot didn't like one of the owners of this organization. So they did whatever it took to kind of get rid of him. Now that's a rumor started, but there's no clarity. There's no, clear statement from Riot. So we don't know if they're going to be.
It is true though. Like, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. We already acknowledged that Riot has a lot of power in the league scene, and they can do things the way they want to do it as they see fit. But I don't necessarily think that, like Monte Cristo showed his point of view. Maybe it was to protect his reputation. Maybe it was because he just wanted people to just see the other side of things.
Of course.
Because Riot put out a pretty vague.
Right.
They put up a vague article that kind of talked about, oh, this is what happened, and this is why we're banning Monte Cristo's team. So that's kind of like goes back to my point earlier about the Esports Integrity Coalition. It is, generally speaking, a good idea to have an organization like this where they're a third party, and then they can make a decision or make a recommendation depending on how involved the game developer or a tournament organization wants to have them, how involved that they want the Esports Integrity Coalition. I guess what I was questioning earlier was that, like you said, eventually it'll get corrupted, or like eventually things like that will kind of go the wrong way. So then the next question would be, if this organization really wants to make sure that they have like disciplinary action and principles that they follow, how do they work to prevent that kind of bias or potential like swinging one way?
Well, that's just the pessimistic side of my, of me thinking kind of somewhat negatively. But in general, I mean, the overall goal and the idea and everything behind it is good, right? You have this third party where it can be completely supposed to be unbiased, but no matter what, the reason why I said potentially could be corrupt is because human beings in general are flawed. Now that's getting into more philosophical kind of nature talks, but yeah, humans in general are flawed. So as the organization grows, they're going to be hiring certain people, and obviously we don't like they're going to be vetted in some cases in some nature, but we don't know for sure whether or not if somebody is in a desperate situation, they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure their situation is better. So if you have a family to feed and all of a sudden you lose something big, you may take bribes in this organization. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to happen specifically.
But you're saying that the potential for
Yeah, it's
corruption or like
possible.
swinging one way is there, right?
Right.
So that's a potential problem that could come from an organization like this existing.
Right.
You have a third party, there are just more chances for something to go wrong. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Right. But because esports in general has these things like cheating, match fixing, there's no possible way that a developer of a developer of a game can completely be impartial when it comes to certain rulings, right? Their profits and every employee of the company depends on how well the game turns out, and they will be making rules potentially, right? They will be making rules that benefit the company itself, whereas this is a third-party organization that benefits only the overall esports community and scene. Right. So having that third party is always better. It's like a mediator. That's why we have a law system in general, because if it's a company, you can like that does something wrong, a person can sue. But if we didn't have a law system, if we didn't have a third party that can be that judge and the jury, then the company can do whatever it wants because it's a company, right? So having that third party organization always I feel more beneficial in the long run of holding or making sure that esports can last as long as it can.
But then I guess that raises a couple of different questions, because if this organization has goals to continue developing the esports scene and continue developing recognition among common people who
Right.
just aren't aware or maybe aren't familiar with the gaming industry, then they need to develop a reputation of their own. They need to be able to earn the trust of the community so then people can see them as, oh, the what is it? The ESIC, what is it?
ESIC.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah, the ESIC is an organization that's that's well reputable, and that if a new game, Lamp Wars, where you're fighting, where it's a game where you're like fighting other people with lamps and stuff, then if that's a new game that people are playing, then it would be cool if part of their way into developing a pro scene would be to develop an organization or to sign a contract with the
Right.
ESIC.
And
So there would be like that incentive for them to continue growing and minimizing corruption, to minimize errors, and to develop the trust of the community, so then they can continue to be the people that can hold
right.
these laws, right?
And they have already started that, right? So they're not only going to be part of the developers like Riot and Valve and those types of things, but they're also going to be part of like tournament organizations.
Wait, are they working with Riot?
No, they're not.
Okay.
They're currently working with IEM, ESL1, ESL Pro Leagues, ESEA Leagues, and amateur competitions. And all of this is going to start August 1st. Now, these are some big names. IEM. IEM is a big organization that runs a whole bunch of tournaments.
Yeah, but they're tournaments.
Right.
Oh.
They're not great, but they're well known, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're well known.
IEM tournaments kind of suck, but you're right. They are well known,
Yeah.
and
then
they've been doing a lot better lately, for
right.
sure.
And then you have ESL, which is a huge. What is it? The ESL is a huge tournament organization as well, and I think they're running certain things like the CS:GO league as well, right? I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't follow the CS:GO scene too much, but yeah, they're a big pro scene as well. So they're already starting to be recognized a little bit by certain organizations, certain scenes. So they have to start somewhere. nobody's going to trust them instantly. That's how nobody in the entire world would be just instantly trusting of an organization like that right away. But you have to start somewhere, and as long as they start building up certain things and building up their reputation, then they can become that third party organization that can be part of, that's a go to whenever any type of esports or any type of game or any type of developer wants to create some type of competition comes to their game.
So something I noticed that was really cool was that the ESIC disciplinary panel, aka all the
Mm-hmm.
relevant people in the organization, they have a lot of different what they can call themselves as legal consultants from
Mm-hmm.
all over the world, which I
Right.
thought was really cool. Um, it also just means that you got a bunch of people who practice law in different countries, so they
Mm-hmm.
may see things differently, they may have different backgrounds in their
Right.
education, but I thought that was really cool because that's kind of an advantage and disadvantage in itself. They all have different views on how different countries
Right.
may do things, and they all have very diverse backgrounds, but that may make it harder
Mm-hmm.
in working with different organizations when they may follow one set of laws based on a specific country, but then the ESIC might be like they might come to a point where they're trying to establish their own laws for esports, right?
Well, they've already done that. They've already created these kind of laws behind cheating and all of
Which they
these
call
different big
principles.
principles, right? They
Yeah.
call, and then they have certain sanctions behind it, and figuring out what the best sanctions are for those actions.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and these rules have already been created, and they're in their like bylines, and kind of it's all public information as well. So all of these rules and everything, it's public. So I'm gonna kind of say a couple of them. So, um, certain things like cheating. Okay, cheating will result in disqualification from a tournament or forfeiture of the prize, and then a ban between either 2 years and a lifetime, depending on the age and level of player. So they have some leeway behind it. So obviously, if you're a 15-year-old player in a very amateur league scene, their goal and their idea behind it is, we're not going to give you a lifetime ban because you're a 15-year-old and you cheated this one time. No, we're going to do what's best, and we're going to make sure that you know that this is a wrong thing to do. And we're going to dole out a punishment based on that. Right? It's the same thing in the law system. If you're under age 18, you don't go to prison right away. You go to juvie. You do certain things that, community service or something like that, to learn that this is not the right thing to do. It's not going to guarantee that you're going to be a changed person after it, but children are definitely more able to be molded a little bit more than adults, right? So they have these types of rules, and they have those type of punishments. They're going to hold hearings based on it, and they're going to judge it. So the way behind these hearings works, I know we're jumping topic to topic, but the way the hearing works is basically the player gets to choose one of these disciplinary, panel people. The the actual organization gets to choose one, and then the chairman is part of it. So there's basically three people that kind of figure it out. Now, and then they basically make a decision based on all the evidence that's provided, everything that is going, and the biggest thing that, all right, actually, back up. What are your thoughts on that? I guess specifically.
I think if ESIC is actually the organization. Okay, so let's say that, Dan and Johnny own a internet cafe, and we decide to partner with ESIC, so they are the ones that will make
Mm-hmm.
all decisions and execute on any decisions that come about that involves cheating or
Mm-hmm.
integrity or whatever. If we just trust them to make those decisions and they just grow with them, then
Mm-hmm.
it works, right? Then we're like, all right, cool. They said that this kid is gonna get like a 12-month ban or like a 2-year ban. Cool. Um, we're holding a higher level tournament where like it was a big charity thing, and then
Hmm.
this one dude was scumbagging, then we give him a 5-year ban, cool. But then like if our little internet cafe only partners with them to take recommendations from them and then we choose how to act on it, then you get a little mixed up because then you have some politics. Maybe the kid that cheated is like a really good friend of yours or like is my cousin or some
Hmm.
crap, and then it gets really messy. I mean, I'm not saying that this is anything we would do. I'm just speaking hypothetically.
Right.
Um, and then there's also the situation where, because you said that a lot of amateur leagues are partnering with them, but they're not at the point where everyone's gonna partner with them. So then you might have some tournaments that are backed by ESIC, some that aren't. It's just gonna be a really weird transition period. I
Oh,
think that
definitely.
the idea of the punishments and then
Hmm.
how they want to go about them seems to make sense. I don't really. I mean, personally, I'm not in a position to consider what else could potentially go wrong
Yeah.
because if this is their job, then I mean they're coming up with it. I'm just spitting out my
Hmm.
opinion, right? But it makes sense. I just think that someone's got to be there to enforce it because even if you and I uh let the ESIC make a decision, who's going to be the one to enforce it? Are they going to put their resources into enforcing a decision about the ban? Are we going to be the ones that have to enforce the decision? And then when you look at larger scale tournaments, who's really going to be, you know, invested in making and
Right.
make sure that these things are follow through? Because
So
cheating is just a really easy example, but then other things it can get more complex.
yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna. So it's going. Yeah, we're not talking about small little leagues like an internet cafe. We're talking about big tournaments recognized pretty much by the world. So it's, each organization, like if you think about it in sports terms, NBA has their own third-party organization, I believe, that well, at least cricket did. Cricket does. I know cricket because Ian Smith talked about this specifically in soccer. They have their third party organization which kind of creates these rules and creates the punishments behind it. And yeah, you're going to have to trust the big organization to kind of actually dole out the punishment. Like you're not allowed to be part of this. You're banned for a year. You can't join. But this is world like recognized. If it's public, players, the community is going to kind of, I believe, I think, I believe that the community can be part of that as well because ESIC is going to make all this information public. So when they say this player has a year ban, the community will know as well. There's going to be a huge backlash if it doesn't get pushed out or if it doesn't get followed upon, right? There's obviously a lot of details that have to be made sure that it's clear, but I feel that with the right kind of organization, right people, they can do it, right? Um, it'll just take some time probably to work out certain kinks, just like everything is when it starts out. Um, but overall, I mean, I think it's a great start. Um, and I mean, in general, I listened to an interview by one of Ian Smith, one of the co-founders of it, and he seemed genuine when it came to certain aspects of the rules and certain aspects of keeping the integrity of it. The biggest thing that he said that will affect esports. It's not like cheating, like using hacks and stuff in the game. It's not doping. It's not all of this little stuff. It's match fixing. It is betting. It is fraud. It is manipulation of the esports itself. There was a huge controversy when it came to CS:GO back in the day. I think the an iBuyPower team. Um, they got banned for pretty much for from all competitions for match fixing. They took in some uh, money in order to intentionally change the result of the game.
They
Right.
intentionally lost
Okay,
because
they
they were going to
intentionally
make more money
lost.
from it. Yeah.
Right. So because esports is growing so big, there are so many more people involved. He even mentioned that things like gangs, like the Yakuza or the big gangs in Asia, are starting to match fix. They're paying players and they're paying organizations in order to intentionally lose. Now, when it comes to that, it's huge for esports because you're basically taking a game, you're spitting in its face, and I mean, it makes it harder to watch and enjoy the game if you feel like there could potentially be this match fixing, right? It changes the number of viewers that you could potentially have. It changes the number of people that are actually interested in the scene itself. So we need some type of ruling, and we need something that kind of prevents or tries to prevent some of it. Or
Another
tries,
thing is
right?
that like a lot of the competitors are kids. They're like 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
They're as young as like 16, 17 year olds sometimes. I don't
Yeah,
know what the rules are in other esports, but I know for League of Legends, you could be 17 years old and play professionally. And
yeah.
a lot of them are like in that the age of college students. So the problem is that when you have kids that young who don't necessarily have the life skills that you would
Mm-hmm.
get from going to a 4-year university, you don't get the real life skills that you would get from even working a service job or you work like a real job.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's not to say that practicing every day for 12, 14 hours a day of a video game isn't a real job. That is hard. That is very intense and that is exhausting. But the skills that you get from practicing an esport are very different from going out into the real world and getting a job, whether it's working at Starbucks or working at a desk where, it's for like a big insurance firm or something. But the thing is, these these young esports players, these young competitors don't have those life skills, so they miss out on a lot of things. And then the point I'm trying to make is that it's really easy to misguide them, especially when you put money in their faces. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity for these players to swing one way or the
Right.
other, kind of like in the case of the I buy power thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it it's a very bold task for the ESIC to try to take on when they're slowly trying to integrate themselves
Yeah.
into the esports scene while it's growing so quickly.
That's specifically why there are reasonable sanctions. Like it is like a ban for a certain period of time, depending on the age of the player. Like they said, Ian Smith was talking about this in his interview, where it said, they don't want to ruin a player. Like esports players already have short lifespans when it comes to um, their time in a certain game or a certain scene. Right? They don't want to ruin an entire career based on that. So they're doling punishments based on certain things like that. And then they're going to have some type of rehabilitation type thing where, like, there was a huge thing when it came to H1Z1. A whole crap ton of players were caught cheating. And in order for them to actually come back to the game, they had to make a public video stating that they changed. It's basically like a humiliation kind of thing where they had to make a public video to the community stating that, yes, this cheating was bad. We're very sorry. We won't do it again. We won't cheat. And then the developer actually allowed them to come back into this. So certain things like that where they kind of teach them a certain lesson in order for them to come back into the right. And they said they had like classes or something like that where players can join again or kind of watch or go through that could help them speed up the process of learning their lesson, right? So yeah, I mean they're kids, but that's where they come into play, where they can create certain punishments to help teach the kids kind of a lesson on what is going to happen, what is generally what's the best way to handle it. So yeah, I mean, overall I think it's a good organization to start off, and it does make sense, right? If you have match fixing in esports, it just makes it so much worse to watch. If you knew, like the LCS, the League of Legends scene, if you knew that like five or two or three of those organizations are purposefully losing, and there are rumors behind it, everything, that entire scene is gonna like lose so many viewers and so much integrity, right? Riot Games is going to lose so much respect. The organizations are going to lose so much respect. Everything about that, and it'll slowly make it into the esports above umbrella thing, where it makes esports look so much worse as well. So there has to be something that kind of backs up all of this.
And then for me personally, as someone who's run college esports organizations before, who's led tournaments and events like this, it definitely helps when you're running the event and you take care of everything, and then someone else can help you with the integrity, and you don't have to be the one to do it. Because I mean, it just sucks when you have to be the one to do everything. And even if it's not just one person like me on a small scale for a college esports program, if you're an organization who has to deal with all these teams, renting out a venue, running a stream, going public online, and dealing with sponsor stuff, and then you got to deal with some scrubs that are fucking like throwing games for no reason, it does help a lot when you have someone else taking care of it. So I think we're in agreement. Idealistically, on paper, this is a great organization and the potential is huge, but execution's going to be really important. Developing trust in the community is going to be really important. And then we also have to see that they just, like, straight up, they just have to make good decisions. We have to be convinced that, you know what, this kind of punishment was appropriate, and here is why. Here is transparency. Here are the facts. Here are some laws from different countries, or like here are some precedents that we've seen before. Even though the situation is unprecedented, maybe they'll deal with it in some way, because a lot of the stuff will set the way, the kind of the template on how to deal with similar situations in the future. So I mean, I think Dan, you and I kind of see things very similarly here, and that we just need to see results, and we need to see it work. But we hope it, ideally this does, right? It'll be really good.
I mean, yeah, that's the final kind of baseline understanding of everything there. We are by far no experts in this itself, but we're sharing our opinions on it. So
yeah.
Any final thoughts?
I don't think that we're gonna see anything in terms of a Riot collaboration anytime soon, but I think that other esports that are trying to grow, that aren't so concentrated in the developer having control of the entire scene, will take advantage of this. Kind of like an outsourcing type of deal. But overall, I think that this kind of organization sprouting up, and the fact that people with law degrees from all over the world, if they see the value in esports, that they went out of their way to create a coalition like this, that in itself should tell you something about the future of esports, about the potential it has, about the value of these players, the community, the games. Because even a lot of people now who I talk to don't really see competitive gaming as a real thing. They don't really see it as anything that's valuable. They don't see it as a legitimate industry that you can work in, make a living off of, and feel fulfillment from. And I think that the ESIC is a really good indicator that those things just aren't true, and that there is a lot of potential in esports. So I think that's just the last thing I want to leave on. For me personally. What about you, Dan?
Yeah. I just think the biggest thing is transparency when it comes to decisions like this. Everything is fueled by the community, the people. They are the ones who, if you don't have the people in the audience to watch, then you have no scene at all. Well, And then if you don't also have the players, you have no scene. So players not only want fair competition, they want to be the best in the world. They don't want to be behind someone who's cheating. So,
Right.
and then also the audience doesn't want to see cheating. Everybody hates cheating. Everybody hates hackers in certain games because it makes the experience not as fun, right? So being able to be transparent about things, and that's why Riot had that huge issue, I think. And I'm pretty sure, I bet they lost a lot of viewers when it came to that, but they're big enough scene where it doesn't really matter. But yeah, transparency is huge, and hopefully this will be the start of kind of legitimizing the entire esports scene itself. It'll take a little bit of time, but it's a very good start. So,
All right. So that kind of wraps it up for this episode. I do want to thank you guys once again for listening to this. If you guys have any ideas, criticisms, comments that you want to share with us, like we kind of been talking about as a common theme with our podcast, we are doing things a little differently every time because we want to see what works, what we like, what we don't like, and how we want to set things up for the future. So just feel free to share with us what your thoughts are. I personally will be traveling to Blizzard HQ in about 2 weeks, maybe like a week and a half actually. It is a week and a half. I'm just a monkey. For a program that I'm a part of, I work with Blizzard and TESPA to help universities in the Midwest with the esports program. So I'm going to go out there and meet my fellow regional coordinators. I'm really excited for that. So we might actually be able to do a podcast from out there, or if not, then Dan and I might just do an episode where we talk about my experience there. Um, I'm also going to be in Tokyo in a couple of weeks too. So I want to keep this going, and I'll probably be doing something from there as well, just talking about my experience there.
mhm.
Yeah, so we do have some stuff planned for the future. Uh,
But let us know. Comment below on the YouTube video or follow us on our Twitter at DJ Talks Podcast. We don't have it up right now. You can. It's
it'll be in the description.
It'll be in the description. It's at DJ Talks Podcast. We do not have any followers on it ourselves yet, so follow us to keep track of when we post what our ideas are, and let us know kind of criticisms, feedback, anything that you would like. Hopefully we'll continue to share different topics as well. Not only going to be talking about gaming, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things, so stay tuned.
Yep, and if you love what you hear, then make sure you subscribe. If not, then you can tell us what you don't like. That's cool too.
Like it, everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see you next time.
All right, thanks for watching and listening.
Bye.